How are you?
Everything's good.
Winding down, Cardiff? Yeah. All right, good to see you all.
So right when the audio kicked in, I heard that phone that I had just heard in here. Yeah, yeah. So we are streaming.
Are there any viewers?
They said it was 3 waiting, and then now we have 0.
0 now.
3 people were waiting, and they were like, "Oh, never mind."
Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone didn't get lunch yet, including y'all, if you want to get a Coke or anything, help us out. You'll be able to tell them apart.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to use yours. Have trouble getting the sound in there.
After you.
That's jumping out of line.
Do they have a veggie sandwich? Sometimes they do something. No, they have it. They've had it, and then sometimes I'll just. I'm not gonna.
So the opiates are with the flies, I warned you that yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's so nice to get out here from the
Yeah. Oh, right, and then you're part of their nursing coaches, they do, and my son actually, probably he's got a professional development class today. And he said, I gotta turn my resume in. I was like, you didn't even let me look at it first, and he said, no, Mom, this is one you helped me work on before. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Then, okay. Yeah, it's been better.
And the only reason I need the actual apple lunches out of my lunchbox is because
Right now.
they've been in there for 2 days.
It was funny because we were sending him videos. A
Yeah.
couple weeks ago.
We're going to Colorado for Mardi Gras, and my friend lives in the city of Wilmington. It has snow there. It has a mountain, so we would go
Yeah.
30 minutes away.
Yeah.
We would have gone.
Yeah,
We would have
no veggie
gone.
sandwiches.
In Colorado.
Are you a vegetarian?
It was beautiful though.
I don't know why I didn't know that. Because I've never been around.
You have to get out of that. Not
It's a good excuse to stay home and be cozy. I mean,
Oh, it doesn't like that.
same old one.
I know, I'm not vegetarian.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we have fireplace.
Oh, you do, you're
Fireplace, fine.
See, we have one, but it doesn't work, like, it's, it's decorative.
Yeah, so if the electricity gone out, it's.
Yeah. We're hoping.
Are you like a good vegetarian or one of those
A lot of
like you only processed food vegetarian?
stand still, go down the chimney.
Probably so.
And then after that, say to use.
Just like getting people's measures and. Hey, y'all, we're waiting for all the AV, to get set up, which I know will be in a sec. But I thought maybe we could go around and talk about people's majors real quick. I know we have a big slew of the teal, so y'all are all the PNs. I'm Liza, I work here and I'm running this career series this year. It's a 4-part series.
Turn it
I
towards
think
them.
some of you guys were with Miss Shanna maybe in the last one, which was on developing awesome resumes and cover letters. If you weren't there, it's all online in Del Lago Career Services. We taped it. So you can go back and revisit it. But yeah, basically like, you know, I saw the need for the career series because we're putting people through and they're getting great degrees and great education, but like the final step is being able to showcase yourself in a really good resume, cover letter, and presenting well in jobs and stuff. And so we wanted to do something to like strengthen that skill set. So real quick, if we could go around, I know we have the PMs, I know we have an electrician back there, Mr. Travis. Anyone else want to say what their major is, Ray? Business? Sorry, I caught you in the right.
Sorry. My major is small business.
Wait.
I just started this semester. Awesome. Go back.
And then I know we have Miss Shalina, who does career advising for Charity School of Nursing. And Miss Lily, who does academic advising. And then I know Miss Professor Terry Gonzalez-Priceman teaches personal finance in the business school, which is a class that everyone should take, including all the people who work here. It's a great class. It's nice to meet you guys. And,
She's raising her hand
Oh.
right there, sorry.
oh yeah,
Another major, music.
music. And then I know we have Professor Dee Chedrick there, who teaches CCSS and all sorts of study skills related to Dr. McGuire's stuff. Any other majors? I think we've had most people big on the PM, which is really great. What year are you guys in the PM program? Second. So you're about to graduate? Awesome. So happy for y'all. Congratulations. And I was a history major and I just sort of fell into this job and went back and got an MBA, which really helped me a lot. But, you know, it's hard to find your path sometimes, but I think this presentation will be really helpful.
I think we're close.
Okay.
So if we want to.
Yes, maybe not. Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? All right. So good afternoon. My name is Susan Salomon. I'm really excited to be here. I'm very happy to be talking today about something that is an area that I've been looking at for a long time. I work at Oxnard Health right now. My job is Assistant Vice President for Workforce Development and Career Solutions. So I actually have a couple of career coaches on my team who help our internal employees when they're ready for something different or new. The career coaches work one-on-one with people who are employees at Oxnard to help them navigate and find other roles that are inside the organization so that they can continue to grow their careers while they stay with us. We are a huge organization, so there's tons of opportunities. We're around 40,000 employees right now, so largest private employer in the States. But before coming to Oxnard, actually coming back to Oxnard, I was working with a home health hospice agency based out of Nashville. Prior to that was with Oxnard, and then for that 20 plus years before that, my husband was in the U.S. Army, and so home is where the Army sent us, and my job, my career was where the Army sent us, and so I have a ton of experience writing resumes, applying for jobs, networking to try and find jobs, interviewing for jobs, and so this is an area that I really enjoy, and I studied a lot just for my own benefit, because I knew as a military spouse, I was gonna be looking for jobs a lot, and so I wanted to know what I was doing and how best to position myself when it came to job searches. So a lot of my experience just comes from my own hard work and hard learning sometimes too. So, and I'm here with my partner, Tom.
First of all, how the sandwiches? It must be good. You guys are chomping down
Quiet.
from back here. So, my name is Tom Jones. I'm the Director of Human Resources at Sheraton New Orleans Hotel. Right, so I've been in the HR game for about 30 years, so seen a lot, done a lot, been a lot of places. You know, unlike the military, hotels, we travel, we transfer, we go everywhere, right? So outside of working in New Orleans, worked in San Diego, San Francisco, Chicago, all big hotels, because I like big hotels. And came back and opened a Hyatt, and went to the Sheraton. So again, a lot of experience, do a lot of coaching stuff, got a lot of clients and all that type of thing, but what I'm passionate about is this type of information because I like to see people get a return on their investment, right? You invest in time, energy, and money into securing this type of credential. The least thing you gotta do is get a job, right? So let's make sure that we pull it all the way through. Otherwise, why'd you do it, right? So I hope that this information that we put together is gonna be beneficial, right? And what I tell my students, because I also teach at UNO at times, you know, we can give you all the information that you have, but if you don't apply it, it's worthless, right? So good stuff, we're gonna want to start.
Now it's asking me to verify clarify myself. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Technology. Let me see, okay. Okay, there it flipped.
Audio's good.
Top. Audio's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, now I'm gonna do it again. Let's see if that works. Okay, great, because this is a tool I wanted to share with y'all for interview practice. So, let's see here. Now can I go back to the slideshow there? All right. So, I know Liza just mentioned the fact that this is part of a 4-part series, so we're here to talk about acing the job interview and how do you get that offer, because that really ultimately is, you know, when you're in school, that's something that you're really looking forward to, is what's next and how do I get that job. So we want to talk about how, once you've used your resume, which I think of that as like a brochure for you or a flyer for you, it's there that hopefully gets the employer interested enough to ask you to come in for a sales call, essentially, right? You get a chance to go in the interview and sell yourself to the employer and talk about what sets you apart, what makes you unique, and why they should hire you. So we're really excited to talk to you about that today. And you already know who we are. But a couple of things we want to make sure we cover today. Researching organizations that you're applying to. So I talk a lot about the job search being a two-way street. And just like you want the employer to be interested in you as a potential employee, they want you to be interested in them as a potential employer. They're not just looking for someone who just wants a job. They want to know why you're interested in working for them specifically and why that job. So we'll talk about that. How do you match your knowledge and skills and ability to what the employer is looking for, so that, again, when you think about sales, right, you're looking for something that fills a need. Well, the employer has a need, and you want to be able to show the employer that you can fill that need for them. And that's, again, with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you bring with you. We'll talk about how to prepare some common interview question answers, so some of the most common interview questions that you're going to get. And then we're going to talk about how you can prepare practically for interviews. So let me keep moving ahead over here. And we really structured this in terms of before, during, and after. So before the interview happens, what are the things that you need to do? Then what do you actually do during the interview? And then the last thing is kind of what's the follow-up after the interview. And I thought this was really helpful. We're going to see this author in a little bit, but this comes from a book called The Job Closer. And it's the author's name is Steve Dalton. I would really recommend his book, The Job Closer, and I would also recommend his book called The 2-Hour Job Search. The 2-Hour Job Search is all about networking to find opportunities for jobs. And then the Job Closer is really about all the other stuff, right? Writing a resume, interviewing skills, negotiating offers, and he's got a lot of practical experience. We'll see a video from him later, but he's with the college, the career services team at Fuqua School of Business, so knows his stuff. But I love this study, and I thought this was really kind of nerve-wracking when I saw the numbers. So what this study found was that if you see there, when interviewers decide whether to hire you or not, 5% of them, so 1 in 20, not a lot, but there's still 1 in 20 who decide within the first minute whether they're going to hire you or not. So it's, what do they know about you by then? What they see, really, right? What they see on the outside of you. So that first minute, important. And then the first to the 5th minute, another 25.5%. So by the 5th minute of the interview, 30%, 1 in 3 interviewers are going to have decided whether they're going to hire you or not. So again, first impressions count for a lot in all phases of our life, but they really count for a lot when we get to our interviews. And then you can see that 5th to the 15th minute, another almost 30% make the decision in that first 15 minutes. So kind of a total of 60%, 6 in 10 have decided yes or no by the 15th minute of your interview. And then you can see 17.5% in the next 15 minutes or anything over 15 minutes. And then after the interview, about 1 in 5 make the decisions after the interview is done. Right? So that was very eye-opening to me. Like, oh my goodness. And I thought it was important to share with you because Those first impressions really are important, and some of the questions we're gonna talk about answering are the questions that are gonna come up in those first 15 minutes. So you really wanna think about, how am I gonna answer those questions most? And then other questions you can think about, but those first 15 minutes are really gonna be their critical minutes for you. So I like that study, and I thought it was very telling. So why don't you talk about this? Because we were talking about this on our call when we were prepping, and I thought this was, you had
This
some
is
good
always,
insight on this one.
this is always good, right? When you get that phone call. I know a lot of you receive the phone call, hey, I want to talk to you, I want to schedule an interview, right? Do you actually answer that call, right? I remember calling one young lady, I called her up, and she didn't pick up the phone, and her friend, who was my manager, she worked for me, was in another office. I said, Bree, I'm calling you, girl, and she's not picking up, so she called her. She said, you know, Tom was trying to call you. She said, oh, I'm sorry, I thought he was a bill collector. I'm like, are you kidding me? So if you're gonna apply for a job, right, I'm hoping that you're gonna answer the phone, but most importantly, what does your voice message say? Right? And you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like, yeah, boo, it's me, or hey, I got you. No, it's not me answering the phone. That's not how you want to sell yourself in the first minute of a call, right? So if you're going to engage in those type of search activities, let's make sure we have a very crisp message. But the other piece is, you know, keep your voicemail box clear. So a lot of times we can call, and what happens? Can't leave a message, right? Because so much information is up in there. And then answer the call appropriately. Let me ask you guys a question. What does that mean, answer the call appropriately? I'm just curious. Anybody want to tell me what they think? Huh? Hello?
Hello, my name is Julio, how can I help you?
How can I, something like that. Now, what's not the right way to answer the phone? Who is this, right? Who is that you? No, I'm not who, right? So just want to make sure we are on the same page with that particular one, because I run into this a lot, right? And no matter what my title is, I love recruiting. I really, really do, right? So, because my motto is, I'm always recruiting. So if you're not ready at this stage, then that study really takes on a different significance, right? And I just want to make sure we understand those particular items, okay? And then, of course, I always tell students, it's okay to ask, what's the expected attire? All right? You'll be amazed how many folks don't ask that question. And what happens is you get there, you're like, oh, wow, you know, I'm dressed a certain way. I'm like, oh, well, we don't dress like that here. Well, that's a disconnect, right? That's an immediate disconnect. And then, you know, who will I interview with? It's okay to ask that question. Is it going to be a panel? Is it one individual? Is it going to be a series? The more you're asking questions of this nature, the more clarity you're going to have when you walk in that room. You're not going to be surprised versus you walk in the room and there's 4 people sitting at a table. Right away, your nerves are going to kick in. You're like, this may not work out well, right? And I know you're prepared. It's just you weren't prepared for that particular item. And then most importantly, right, the address of the location. Why is that important? What do you think?
Make it on time.
Make it on time. Know where you got to go, right? You may be surprised how many buildings are on there. Guys, this is really, really important. One of the things I always recommend, I always tell people apply for my job, come to the hotel, sit down, check it out. At least I know you can get here, right? Same thing applies, even if you're going to big hospital, right? So I just think it's very important when we address ourselves in those manners. Now back to you.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up a great example. How many of you been to one of the Oxnard hospitals, especially the one on Jeff Highway? Like, has anybody ever been lost in that building? Yeah. Yes. Some of the buildings are huge, and so, you know, making sure you feel comfortable and you're not, I mean, you're already stressed enough. I'm not gonna say you're not gonna be stressed before an interview. You're already stressed enough before an interview. You don't need to add stress to yourself by being panicked about getting to the interview on time because you haven't scoped it out ahead of time. Liza was great, and she gave us really good specific directions on how to get here before we got here today. And again, just like Tom said, if the person that you're working with doesn't offer that, it is absolutely okay and really recommended to ask, because they want you to get to the interview on time, you want to get to the interview on time, you're both on the same page. And I did want to share, there's a video about expected attire that I found that I thought was really kind of funny, very, you know, very blunt, but I thought it would be good for us to watch that. So this is a young lady, she's put it together herself. Oh wait, I'm using the wrong mouse. Too many computers here going.
What is she After that, I made a list of what not to wear at a job interview. Goofy t-shirts are don't. If the shirt says party naked, wear it to a party, not an interview. Sagging pants are just unprofessional. You're not coming to work to model your Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein boxers. Put a belt on it. Tops that show too much breast on any midriff are unprofessional. They say that you come to work to flirt, not handle business. Hi. Don't go crazy with the makeup and jewelry. And skip the Edward Scissorhand nails. And that's how you Having your hair done is important. It shows that you take care of yourself. Sweatpants make you look like you just got out of the gym. The interview won't take you seriously. Follow the lead of the people who already have the job that you want. For instance, if you're applying at a place where people are wearing suits, wear a suit. If they are wearing business casual, like a blouse and a skirt, wear something similar.
Yeah, so I like that one. Because I thought some great points there. And Tom, what did someone bring? Do you remember what the story you told me about what someone brought to an interview with you? I think it was in California.
Yeah, they brought a surfboard. So in San Diego, right, we were right by the beach, and we had a job fair at the hotel, and the guy walked up in his lifeguard uniform and a surfboard. I'm like, okay, I must be in California. I'm like, yeah, I'm here for a job. You know, I'm applying for a job by the pool. I'm like, okay, well, put your surfboard aside and see what we can do, right? So we just don't do those type of things, right? That's your calling card. So I would never forget it, but needless to say, you didn't get that particular job. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great rule because you want to be memorable after your interviews, but you want to be memorable for a good reason, not a bad reason, right? And so bringing your surfboard to an interview, probably a bad reason to get remembered at an interview. So, and then, you know, again, Tom, jump in because I know this is something we were talking about too, that I wanted to make sure folks know, you know, we've been in HR for a while. I'm not going to say how long, but a while. And there are different people who are going to interview you at different points in the interview process. My older son is actually interviewing right now for a new job. And I think yesterday it was like his 5th interview in the interview process for this job. I mean, it was a long interview process. And so fortunately, he's familiar with the process and the employer, and so he knows what to expect. But if I was interviewing for a job, what the heck is going on? How many interviews do I have to get through to get this job? And then who am I interviewing with? So I think it's helpful to know that there are different people who are going to interview you. There's folks in the talent acquisition team, recruiters, sometimes there might be screeners, it just depends on the size of the organization. But they might have dedicated people in HR who are interviewing everybody before the person you would actually work for, also known as the hiring manager. Before the hiring manager interviews you, you might have to go through a screening process with someone in HR, oftentimes a recruiter. The hiring manager we talked about, sometimes they want you to interview with the leadership team, other people that might be working with you. And sometimes they ask you to work or interview with colleagues. So there's a variety of ways that you may get interviewed. I know for our nursing students, one of the things we often ask is that you do a job shadow, right? We want to make sure that, again, two-way street, if you're coming to work in Oxnard, we wanna make sure you feel comfortable in the unit and the department you'd be working on. They wanna feel comfortable with you too, but we want you to know what you're getting into, so those job shadows are a really important opportunity for you. It is also an opportunity for kind of an extended interview. You know, the people you're shadowing are gonna be talking to you, trying to get to know you, and they'll be part of that conversation when the decisions are being made about, are we gonna hire this person or not, right? So really important to know who all's involved in the interview. And then, Tom, do you wanna talk about the different kinds of interviews?
So I'm sure you're familiar with a phone interview, right? What do you think a phone interview is? You think it's video sometimes, right? Like FaceTime, something like that, or what? Right? Because what's amazing is, how many people do a FaceTime interview from their car? Like, yeah, I'm like, oh, you know, you got a nice car, what have you, right? So again, preparing for these type of interviews is just as critical. You got to know this information in advance, right? So you got to take advantage of that type of stuff. The in-person interview is exactly what it says, but again, I like to understand what that looks like. You're seeing more and more panels, right? I know we set up panels for stakeholders at our hotel, because if you're going to interview for a role, you're going to impact at least 3 other departments. So it's important for them to understand you and you understand them, right? A stress interview, I call an interview stressful in and of itself, right? But, you know, you put that in perspective, you think about it. I'll give you an example, right? It may not sound stressful, but my daughter is going through residency interviews. And there's 15 of them, 15 different hospitals, but they always have what they call happy hour. And happy hour is before, which is a gathering of not just students who get looking for residency, but other residents, and they're supposed to have a glass of wine, whatever, on video, right? So you're thinking, wow, I'm being interviewed at the same time, and it's a social hour, right? That in and of itself can be some form of stress, because again, you're gonna pay all this money to go to med school, you know you wanna get that residency, but you don't wanna get stupid drunk on video, right? So we gotta understand those type of things. Group interviews, which I'm really an advocate of, right, is really supposed to technically, I think, take away the stress, but if you think about it, if you're not prepared, it creates more stress for you, and it definitely forces the cream to rise to the top in the actual process, right? So it's a big thing. And the behavior interview, which a lot of companies feature, especially Marriott, right? That's really a situational type interview, right? Tell me about a time with X, Y, and Z. And you see a lot more companies doing that because they really want to understand how you're going to not just respond, but predictively behave in the future, right? And it's amazing to me how simple that interview is, such as give us a situation or a task, specific actions that you actually took, and then the actual result. How many people can't formulate a response in that cadence, right? As simple as it sounds, just folks can't do it because they're not conditioned those type of interviews. So again, as you're preparing, asking that question when you get that phone call and understand it. If you get that intelligence, then let's make sure you prepare for it, okay? Any questions? We're gonna move on. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, you know, again, in addition to knowing who might be interviewing you and what kind of interview you're coming in for, you also want to know a little bit about the organization that you'd be going to work for. And so these are just a few things I would recommend. My goodness, I don't know how to get my team's messages to stop. But these are a few things that we would recommend that you would look up about the company that you're going to go in for an interview with. Now, you may not have time to look it up prior to the screening, although I'd recommend that you do. But sometimes you answer the phone and they start screening you right then. So you really don't have any time to prep for a screening interview. But if you have time to prepare for the interview, these are the kinds of things that you want to look up about the organization. First, what's going on in the industry. Now, you know, we all know healthcare, right? There's a lot going on in the healthcare space right now. Hopefully, you know, we're getting through some of the crisis in terms of staffing. You know, we're not seeing as much travel nursing happening as it was in the height of the pandemic. But, you know, that's something that is changing in our healthcare industry. You want to know about the organization. What's the mission of the organization? Where are they going in the future? And is that someplace you'd like to go? Because if they're going someplace you don't want to go, then that might not be the right organization for you. And then what are their values? Because probably you're going to get asked about at least one of the values that the organization has and how well does it align with your personal values and when's the time that you demonstrated that value. So important to know just some high level things about it. Recent development for the company, I was working, I mentioned the home health hospice company that I was working for in Nashville before I came back here. For the longest, maybe the last 2 years, they were supposed to be acquired by Humana. And just recently, it broke that Humana, the deal fell apart, so Humana's not gonna acquire them anymore. Well, if I was going to interview with that company right now, I probably should know that they're not under acquisition anymore, right? I should know that, I should have picked that up in the news. So pay attention to what's going on in the organization. Know a little bit about the organizational leadership. For those of you who get the opportunity to participate in any events, like outreach events, I know Oxford does a lot of outreach events for nurses. Oftentimes, our chief nursing officers are gonna be at those events. And I cannot tell you what a missed opportunity it is for you to not go to an event where a chief nursing officer is gonna be, and you get a chance to meet him or her and talk to them about working in their facility. Because then you become a face and a name that they know and recognize, and that just makes things a little bit easier for you when it comes to the job search. So know a little bit about the organizational leadership. Find out what people say about the company. We're gonna provide some websites for you to look at in a little bit. And then pay attention to what knowledge, skills, abilities you need to do the job. And we're gonna talk about where to find these things here in a minute. So Tom, anything to add to that? And then maybe you wanna touch on the next slide.
No, we're good.
All right, so how can you research these companies? You wanna talk about? Yeah,
I'm
go.
messing with it, right? So,
Okay.
you know, word of mouth, right? We all get information from word of mouth. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna work at a hospital or a hotel particularly, right? Because somebody you know that works there, and they don't wanna take advantage of that referral fee, right? So, they're always recruiting for you, but all this is great information, right? But what's important for me is it an organization that you truly wanna work for, right? It's one thing to say you need a job, it's another thing to know the type of organization you wanna work with. And that's important, right? Because not every organization offers the same thing. So as much information you can get from these various resources, it works for you, okay? But if you don't do this due diligence now, I'm telling you, it's gonna catch you on the back end. Because what's amazing to me is how many people we interview, and it's a setup. So Tom, what questions do you have for us? I have none, right? That just seals the deal. You have no questions about an organization that you're trying to spend half your life at. You have to ask some questions. You have to be prepared for that type of question, right? And the only way to do it is to do your research, okay? Any questions about that? Yes?
Are there any, I know you mentioned some questions, not that, I know you mentioned not to wear certain things during the interview. Are there specific questions not to ask during that interview?
We have a slide for that?
Inappropriate questions?
I don't think we do have a slide. I think that we'll have to ad-lib that one.
Okay, so at what stage, right? So it's various stages. I think when you're going through that first stage of the interview, what's important to you? Think about it, right? If you're gonna work in a hospital, what's important to you, right? Shift, various things, right? Compensation, right? Now, if it's about pay and there's no other interview, that's appropriate. But if there's other interviews that you know you gotta conquer first, you're gonna hold off on that particular information, right? Because wrongly or fairly or unfairly, the person that's screening you or interviewing you is gonna get the wrong impression, okay? For me, it's about what's important to you. And if you wanna make sure that this organization is truly represents a place I wanna spend time, okay? That's always been my go-to.
Yeah, no, I love that, and when you were talking about the, not having any questions, I was thinking about dating, right? But if you were on a date, and you were asking a whole bunch of questions of the person that you were on the date with, and they didn't ask you anything, would you be interested in continuing to date that person? Probably not, because they're not interested in you. And then if the only question they asked you is like, how much money do you make? You probably would also not be that interested in continuing to date that person, right? So I think that's, if you think about it that way, you're trying to decide, to your point, Tom, is this an organization I want to be in a long-term relationship with, right? And so, and they're trying to figure out the same thing about you. So you want to show up as someone that they think, yeah, this person would be a good long-term partner for us to advance our mission. And you want to feel like, yes, this place would be a good long-term partner for me, and it's going to help me advance in my career, advance personally. So, those are the things to think about. Indeed and Glassdoor, I think there's a couple things interesting about those websites I'd point out. They have employer ratings. So you can actually go in and read how people rate and comments that people make about, you know, the particular employer that you might be interviewing with. I do always say, like, read them with a grain of salt, because when do people put comments on the internet? When they're mad, right? Like, they're not going on there because they had a good experience, usually. They're going on because they're ticked off and they want everybody to know about it. So just, again, be aware that when you're looking at those sites, take it with a grain of salt, because there's probably gonna be more bad reviews than good reviews, but that's because human nature, we like to complain. And so we're just gonna get up there and complain in public, so everybody knows about our bad experience. So just, you know, take it with a grain of salt. And then we had talked too about what you wear, right? What to wear at an interview. If you do, like Tom was saying earlier, you show up at the Sheraton and you just sit in the lobby and watch what the people with the Sheraton badges, you know, walking around, what are they wearing? You get a chance to see, okay, that's probably what I need to essentially show up in for my interview. So if you get a chance to like do the dry run, how do I get there? But then spend a little bit of time hanging out so you can kind of get a lay of the land in terms of what kind of clothes people wear too. In that particular employer, that's also a great way. And then the secret shopping too is you get to see how people talk to each other at that particular employer, right? Same thing with job shadowing. You get to see how people on that unit interact with each other or don't. And so I think that kind of do your secret shopping if you have the time, because you get a chance to see actually what's going on in that particular employer.
And that will actually lead to a question. Okay, you want to really impress the recruiter, reference, you know, when I stayed at the hotel the other night to prepare for the interview, they're gone. You even blew their mind. They're gone, literally. What? You say, really? And then the pivot's going to be, what'd you see? What'd you eat? The interview's changed at that point. Your calling card is memorized. Because no other person you're competing against is going to do that. Right? Because remember, an interview is a fancy word for competition. You have to understand that particular item. Right? If not, then you're not going to take it serious enough to win. Right? And I know all of you in it to win it, right? That is not convincing at all. Right, yes.
Well, I just had a really small question for Susan, which is, just because we have all the PNs here,
Yeah.
like, what's a typical great outfit for a PN to wear? So-
I think you'll probably, especially if you're interviewing and you're gonna do a job shadow, you'd go in your scrubs.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I would ask the recruiter,
Yeah.
but yeah, especially if you're gonna be on a unit.
What's appropriate interview attire?
Yeah, 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 and am I gonna do a job shadow? They try and arrange it so that you do your interview and job shadow at the same time, just for convenience for you as a candidate. But it also has to work for your schedule, so, you know. Yeah. So, and then informational interviews, a lot in that book I mentioned earlier, the 2-hour job search, he's got a ton of information about how to do informational interviews. And then the job posting, we said earlier, knowledge, skills, and abilities. If you look at the job posting that you apply to, it'll tell you, like, what's the knowledge you have to have, what skills do you have to have, right? What abilities do you need? And I always recommend, because we all apply online to jobs now, right? Grab, save a copy of the job posting that you're applying to, because, you know, you may get a call for an interview a couple of weeks later and the job posting may not be up anymore. So, you know, grab a copy of it when you're applying so that you have that for future reference. And then here's the common questions that you want to prepare for. And this is, again, if you think back to that pie chart that I had earlier, tell me about yourself. So you walk in and you make some small talk, right? They're going to ask you about the weather, you know, just kind of little small talk stuff. And then they're going to say, tell me about yourself. And you're probably 5 to 10 minutes into the interview at that point. And then the next couple of questions, why this job, why this industry, or why this job, why this organization, or why this industry sector. Like, by the time you answer those first few questions, you're at that kind of 60% mark where 60% of them will have made a decision. So these first 4 questions are really, really critical for you to be able to answer effectively. And I think that Steve Dalton, who's the author of those books, says it best, so I'm gonna actually show a video of him. But he's got this little, he calls it the FIT model, where it's, what was your favorite part? what insight did you gain, and then how did you transition, or why did you transition to your next role? So let me show you the video, and you can hear him say it in his own words. All right. I think we're at the right part of the video here.
Is looking for. And the employer is looking for a human being whose story just makes sense, someone that they can root for. So that's where I realized, okay, we know this question is coming. There should really be a framework for it. How do we do that? How do we accomplish a likable answer that doesn't require too much energy to tell so that you can remain a human being? And that's where Team A was born. My answer, my solution to Team A, which is called FIT. F is for your favorite part, I is for the insight that you gained, and T is for the transition you made. And it's a reusable format that you can just use for the entirety of your answer to tell me about yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, could you give us an example?
Certainly. So I think one thing that I failed to mention is that 30% of there's a great study by Frieder Van Eydeking and Raymer, which found that 30% of interviewers were making decisions in the first 5 minutes of the interview. And in that first 5 minutes is tell me about yourself. It's small talk and it's tell me about yourself. So to kind of, it's a deceptively easy question to answer poorly because you never really get feedback on it. So you'll feel great because you were talking about yourself and you got through it. So, and the interview didn't end, so you must have done okay. But it sets the groundwork. I mean, 3 out of 10 interviews are decided already by the time you're done with tell me about yourself.
So crazy.
It's crazy, and like, so I can't say and tell you all interview questions are equal when 60%, so 60% of decisions are made in the first 15 minutes. And that's when what we call the big 4 are covered, which is tell me about yourself, why this company, why this role, and why this sector. You won't always get all 4 of the big 4, but you'll usually get 1 or 2 of the, what we call the why questions, plus tell me about yourself. But back to how FIT actually works.
Yeah.
Basically, rather than talk through all of the things that you did, which is already in your resume, your responsibility are already in your resume, and the person who interviews after you, or who has that job after you, would have the same exact tell me about yourself if you cover what you did. Like, they'll talk about the same exact responsibilities, same exact tasks. Every other question you get in your interview will cover your, like, what you did. But why you did what you did, that's the question that only tell me about yourself can answer. So FIT really focuses you on the whys rather than the whats.
Yes.
So the favorite, for each stage of your career, you would highlight your favorite part about a particular role. But if it were the perfect job, you would have stayed forever. So there had to be an aha moment, an insight that led you to think a transition would be appropriate, even if that transition is just accepting the promotion that they offer you. But by focusing your attention on one favorite task, rather than 3 or 4 things that you did, your energy stays up. You're not working from memory, trying to regurgitate that laundry list of tasks that you want to make sure the employer knows about. They probably already read about the resume if they were interested, or they skipped it entirely anyway. But you'll have some natural energy. This is flattering to you. This is fun for you. Like, this is your favorite part. So you're going to have that normal energy that happened during small talk. That likable person's going to shine through.
So I'd love to hear from you, like if you think about a job you've had in the past, can you think about what was your favorite part of the job? What insight did you gain about yourself that made you think, you know what, I really think I want to change jobs? And then what did you transition to, or why did you transition to that next job? So can anyone think of an example of a job that you left and how you could talk about FIT? Yeah.
I left the job at Son of the St. Metro for the little boys, and my insight was my patience was lacking more and more, and there wasn't a reason for me to, treat families differently. So I switched over to an administrative role to a school board where we're still helping families, but I'm not specifically providing resources.
The direct service. So what was your favorite part of the Son of the Saint job?
My favorite part was seeing the transition from childhood to adulthood and the progress.
Yeah. And then your insight, you had the self-awareness to see, like, I'm starting to get burned out, right? This is starting to get hard for me, and I don't want that to have a negative impact on the people I'm taking care of. So let me find something where I'm maybe not providing direct service. Whether it's temporary or permanent, let me change into something where I can kind of get my energy back. And so I think think that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. So do you hear, like, instead of him just saying, well, I worked at some of the same, then I moved to an administrative job with a school, like, again, I could read his resume and see that. But now we know a little bit more about him as a person, and that's gonna help us figure out, is he gonna be a good fit for what we need him to do, right? So that's a really great way, that fit model, I think, is a really positive way to frame your whys for when you change jobs, and it helps the employer get to know you a little bit. So, anything else on that?
Yeah, and when they ask the question, don't say I'm a Sagittarius, you know, that's just not the right place for that response, right? So I'm just saying, we gotta watch out for those types of things, but I love that particular piece, it's really an overview, right? So I always ask, give me an overview about you, right? Your transition, whatever. And it should at least make you relax to respond versus, tell me about yourself, and you're like, I have no idea what to say, right? And a lot of people are stuck with that dilemma. I'm glad he phrased it in that way.
Yeah, and the other thing that, you know, the other version of this question is walk me through your resume. But again, the employer has looked at your resume, or they should have looked at your resume. And so they really don't want you to walk them through job by job because they can read. What they're really looking for, and I ask people, tell me the story about how you got to the job you're in now, right? Like, I'd love to hear how you moved from one to another. That walk me through your resume can be death by resume, and it also takes a really long time. We want to keep our answers short and sweet, a couple of minutes, probably max. So when you're thinking about how do I want to answer each of these questions, think about how you can answer them in a way that you can get through it relatively quickly. For those of you, like, you know, I've been around for a while, so I probably have to clump some of my jobs together. I can't go job by job and do a fit for each job. I have to probably go from, like, when we lived in this place, and then when we lived in this place, right? I might do it as we moved around. But, you know, think about how you can limit your answers to a couple of minutes. And then why this job, why this organization, why this sector industry? It goes, you know, I hate to keep using my dating analogy, but they want to know that you're interested in them, that you're not just interested in their wallet, right? As an employer, we want to know that you want to do this job because you're passionate about this job. You're passionate, for me, about healthcare. For Tom, you're passionate about hospitality, right? So, or that, you know, we have a lot of folks at Oxford that everybody in their family works there. And so they really know the organization, they know what a culture we have, you know, they know what our culture's like, and they want to work there because of the culture of the organization. So those are the big questions. And then, Tom, we were talking about STAR, which I have on the next one. Do you want to talk about behavioral questions, and I can flip to the STAR model?
Just flip to the STAR, I think
Yeah.
it'd be easier to grasp. Right, so again, the situational based questions, this is the cadence of which the answer is really expected, right? And when they want to hear about a specific situation, not a long story about Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? And that's when you know someone's grasping at a straw. They start telling the story, well, you know, I had time, and then I did this, and then, okay, no. Specifically, what was the situation that you did, right? Or specifically, describe the task that was delegated to you that you're responsible for, right? And then the actions. So it's really the actions that you took, not the team. Oh yeah, we did, no, what specific action did you take to drive the particular result? Okay, and I think that's really, really critical here. And there are more and more companies converting to these types of questions again, because it's history, right? And it's the greatest predictor of time. So if you're able to phrase this in the right way, that person interview or that panel, they're literally envisioning you in that role, right? You're painting a picture for them to clearly see. And if you do it successfully, they're going to be very pleased with the outcome, okay? But again, it's all about preparation. And if you don't know this or you don't ask, then you're going to walk into the interview blind. And it's going to throw you off. It does. A lot of people.
Yeah. So that's a great model for remembering how to structure your answers, particularly when they're asking these questions. Tell me about a time when you did something. Tell me about a time when you showed compassion for a patient, for example. Or, you know, tell me about a time when a customer in a hotel was upset at the front desk. How did you handle it, right? So those are great opportunities for you to describe a little bit more about the situation, and then, like Tom said, the rest of that. A couple other questions, strengths and weaknesses. Who likes to talk about what you're bad at? Nobody, right? It is a question they're gonna ask, because as an employer, I do wanna know, like, if you have a critical weakness, like, I hate taking care of people and you're becoming a nurse, like, I probably should know that, right? I probably should know that. But, you know, in really what I'm trying to get at is, do you have the self-awareness to know what you're not good at? And what are you doing about it? Because we all have things that we're not good at, right? Mine is like, you know, setting a clear vision and making sure my team and I have a really solid rhythm for tracking progress on our goals. I know that's not something I'm excellent at. So what am I doing about that? You know, I read books, I'm trying a new system for it. Like, I have to know this is something I'm not good at, and here's how I'm doing, what I'm doing to try and get better at it, right? That's what I'm looking for as an employer, really. Salary expectations, again, we talked about, you know, that's really not a question you asked. I always tell people it's, you know, you want to try and make sure you're in the right ballpark, but it's like, it's hard to know whether you're going to have the right number or not, and you don't want to get eliminated from the pool of applicants just because you said the wrong number. So I think focusing on what Tom said earlier is like, I want to make sure this is a good match. And then if we both feel this is a good match, I'm pretty confident that we can figure out salary expectations later, right? So that's one way to handle it. There's a lot of different ways to handle the salary question. Oftentimes we ask it on your application because we want to know, like, if we're, you know, this job pays $50,000 and you want $100,000, we're pretty safe guessing that it's not going to be a good match, right? Like, it's not going to work for you. So, and then as Tom already talked about, well, what questions do you have for me?
Right, so a lot of companies are converting to what they call pay transparency, right?
Yes.
You know, Marriott's done it, where they actually list the minimum and maximum pay for those positions, right? And the motivation is to eliminate the need for you to ask that question, because it's posted already. Right? So if you know the maximum is 100 and you ask for 200, you know you're not getting that call, right? Don't take it personal, it's just not gonna happen. But for me, it's easier to communicate when you have this already, when it's very visible. And you saw more of that coming out of COVID, right? Because everybody was competing for talent at that particular time, so you start posting wages, right? Oh, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So you saw everybody, I'm gonna flock over here, sign on bonuses. So you knew in advance what the position paid. You really shouldn't have to come up.
I would add to that, you can do internet research too, like if you wanna go in and, you know, look at a ballpark, just you can Google average salary for LPNs in the New Orleans area. And so you kind of have that, and at least you have that in your back pocket if they push you on the, okay, well, I understand you wanna talk more, then figure out, but like what, you know, you could say it's $61,000.
Yeah, but I've done
You could
my
say a range
research,
of maybe,
and
you
here's-
know,
yeah,
from
here's what I'm
61
looking
to
for.
$71,000,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So you're in that ballpark.
100%. And I think what your point too, Liza, is if you've done your research, then you say, like, look, I looked at a couple of different websites. Salary.com is a good one. I've looked at a couple of different websites, and here, when I looked at the New Orleans area for licensed practical nurses with, you know, my years of experience, here's the range that I saw. So I'd be expecting a fair amount somewhere within that range, right? So and then that way, they know you've done your homework, right? You know what you're talking about. So we talked about STAR. There was something else I wanted to say on this one, and I can't remember. Oh, I always remind people too that salary, like, there are ranges for jobs, right? And the ranges are based on the supply of talent that we have and then the demand for that talent. So just like economics, when, you know, there's not a lot of eggs right now and we all still want eggs, so eggs are expensive, right? So it's the same thing. When there's not a lot of something and there's a high demand like we had during the pandemic, you saw the salary for nurses and all healthcare staff going up because there was high demand and the supply actually contracted because people were like, I can't work right now, my kids are home, I can't get into it, I can't go take care of patients in person, right? I've got elderly parents, I don't wanna bring COVID home to my family. So we saw the supply contract and we saw the demand go up. And so the prices went up, and we're starting to see like it's really stabilizing back to more normality now for us. So remember that, like the job salaries are really based on supply and demand, and we do a lot of work, and I'm sure Sheraton does it too, to like look at the market to see like what is the supply and demand and where are we and are we competitive financially. So just practical preparation. Oh yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, do you have any, like, for example, salary, you can look at the range? How about the supply and demand thing? Do you think we can able to do that anyway?
Yeah, there are. I'm kind of weird and geeky that way. So, so there's a couple places. The U.S., I think it's the Bureau of the Census, have the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's really good for folks when you're thinking about going into a particular discipline, because it doesn't just tell you like the next couple of years of demand, it tells you the next 10 years. Like, is this job gonna grow by 2%? Is it gonna grow by 10%? Is it gonna grow by 15%? Right, that tells you what demands is happening. And then there's another website called Projection Central. I'm really getting geeky now. Projection Central, and that goes to state level demand. So if you wanna see what's happening in Louisiana specifically, you can go to Projection Central to see
But
what's
is
happening.
it showing right now, or we will do it for
It predicts out for like, there's like a two or 3 year window and then a 10-year window that they're predicting. Yeah, yeah. And people way smarter than me are figuring out what the supply and demand are. It's not, I don't know how to do that. So we've talked a lot about this. Is there anything you want to call out here, Tom?
I think we hit everything. I do like arranging childcare. That's really important. You don't want to bring Junior to the interview and have him sit in the locker. I'm just saying. It happens. I'm just saying. You don't want to do that particular item. And then most importantly, I do think the fit does matter, right? Because that's really another part of your calling card. So you got to take time on what you're going to wear. Because you understand what it is that you're going to wear to the actual interview. I see a lot of misfits in outfits in a lot of our interviews. If you don't wear slippers, I shouldn't be telling you this, right? But you would think folks would know that, right? I'm just telling you, folks wear some wild things, and they look kind of wild. And they apply for a job in a hotel. I don't get it, right? So I think everything else, I think, of course, technical technology is used. There's nothing like having a Teams interview and your stuff don't work. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm sorry. And then you're messing around. Oh, I can't take the camera on. What are you communicating at that particular point? Not a good sign, right? So, again, and you're going to know this in advance. So there's no reason for us not to understand a particular aspect the day of. Okay? So that's just important. I think,
Maybe print a copy of your resume, and you could bring a couple copies of your resume for your interviewer, but you for sure want to have one for yourself.
Yeah.
So when you're talking and giving your answers, you can reference back, if you have a little, brain lapse for a sec, you can check on your resume and like, look at the date you employed at a certain place, or job description, response.
I'm glad you said that. Right? What I'm seeing now in our system sometimes, people think that they're attaching a resume to the application, and they're attaching like recipes or phone numbers. I'm like, do you understand what you maybe you're having a bad day. I'll call you like, hey, John, hey, you sure you want to send that resume, man? Because that's not a resume. Oh, I'm sorry. I give people a check, right? But I'm just saying, all those things are calling cards, right? You don't think about it because I'm busy applying. Yeah, people put some wild stuff in these applications now. I don't know what that means now. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Liza, because again, you're gonna be nervous, right? If you're not nervous in an interview, you're probably not human, or you don't care about the job, which either one is not good. But you're probably gonna be nervous, so anything you can do, including bringing your own resume, a copy for yourself, so that you can reference it, and you're not trying to rely on your memory, and maybe misspeak in the interview, I think that's a great add there too. And then for practicing your questions, I think there's a, with artificial intelligence, there's so much cool stuff happening now. So there's a website, it's called Udly. I'm gonna share a demo of it, and y'all can laugh at me, because Tom encouraged me to make my own video, and I did. But it's a website called Udly, and you tell it what you want to interview for, and then it comes up with some questions, and it actually interviews you, does a video, and then it gives you a critique of what did you answer well, and what are your areas of opportunity. So I want to show you a little bit about what happens when you use it. and the kind of feedback that you can get from it. I think it's this one. Here's mine. So Udly is, you can see it there, Y-O-O-D-L-I, Udly. And you have to create an account, of course, but this is one I did yesterday, and I thought it would be fun. All right, so you can see, this is all its feedback it gave me. I was testing it, though. You'll see how I was testing it in a second.
How do you prioritize tasks when managing multiple patients?
I usually look at the list of patients that I have, and then I try and figure out, what things are most urgent for those patients. So I look at the time that I have available, and then I also look at, how sick the patients are, and then once I have a sense of those two things, then I figure out which thing I'm gonna do first for which patient. So that's kind of the way I prioritize my time.
All right, I'm gonna pause it there because you got the message. I was testing it. I was curious if it would say, don't eat during interviews. It didn't. But I was really curious if it would. It didn't pick up on that. But you can see here, your response about accurate medication administration, which is the one I didn't show you, is thorough and methodical. Nice job. But when I was answering that question, how do you prioritize tasks, it says, consider giving detailed examples. So it gives you really thorough and good feedback on how you're doing in your interview. So I would really recommend, especially if you're someone who feels nervous about interviewing, this is a great tool to help you get some very unbiased, unemotional feedback about where you do well in interview questions and where you can do better. So strongly recommend trying Udly out and seeing if it.
Don't eat the chip.
Yeah, do not eat chips. Yes, go ahead.
What is the website again?
So it's hold on. It's Y-O-O. Is it up in that right corner?
Y-O-O-D-L-I.
It's very tiny up there.
Yeah.
If we can send it out, we'll send out the recording of
Yeah, that's what I was right
this
there.
whole thing, and I will send out Udly too. And I'll send out Steve Dalton's thing with the titles of the books too.
Thank you. Yeah. So then, you've done all this work, and now like the interviews today, right, or even tomorrow, you just want to do some of your last minute preparation, right? Like make sure you're ready for everything, and make sure you're well rested. And then you're there at the interview, and so just a few things. Do you want to cover this, Tom? I'm going to try and get our other video. I think
Okay, so arriving early is a no-brainer, am I correct? Don't arrive late. You are interviewing the moment that you arrive. And I always tell this to people, even when you're in class, you're interviewing, right? Even when you're at the store, you're interviewing. I kid you not, because you just never know who you're talking to, right? I remember a philosophy instructor of mine said, he wrote on the whiteboard, you don't know who I are. And that's always struck with me, because you don't know who you're literally standing next to in the line in Starbucks, right? Or wherever you may shop. And I think that's important, okay? And demonstrate confidence. I think that's important. Remember, yes, you're interviewing, but if they didn't want to hire, they wouldn't have posted the position, okay? So I understand being nervous, but you are an asset, and you have to behave in that way. If you walk in there defeated, you will be defeated, right? Make that interviewer say, damn, man, that person was great, right? And take pride in what you have to bring. And I think the handshake, the eye contact, posture, of course, the tone of voice, and that, you don't be screaming in the interview, but of course you want to clear and resonance, what have you. And then this, to me, is the calling card of the century, right? Let me ask you guys a question. What is that? It's a smile, right? And I'm amazed how many people no longer smile. Literally, no longer smile. I was in Thailand earlier in the year, right? I went to this university, and it was a program for people learning to become flight attendants, right? And on their desk was a mirror on a stand. And I asked them, what is that? Well, they have to practice their smile at all times. They have to be on point. Even when they're upset, they're smiling. So imagine if you had a mirror in front of you, 2-hour class. That'd be kind of wild, right? But folks, if you're not really practicing how you come across, really, that interview's kind of messed up in the first minute. If you walk in there pissed off, you're gonna get the outcome you desire, right? If you're jovial, what have you, glad to be there, I'm bringing something to the table, it should resonate, right? It should literally lift off of your body, right? And so always think about that. Now, I don't want you to be a robot. I don't want that. I don't want you to walk around. You might get arrested for some of the things you might expect, right? But you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So I'm glad we have this on the slide because people don't smile anymore. And I don't understand why. Okay, help me out with that.
Thank you. And I know we're close to time, so I'm gonna, the last video will be linked in the slides. And it's a video from Indeed. I mentioned Indeed earlier. It's a video from Indeed on what interviewers are looking at when you walk in, from the minute you walk in the door, the observations they're making. I think it's a really good one to watch, and it talks about a lot of the things that Tom was just mentioning there about posture, handshake, even who you greet and how you greet people. You never know who's gonna get asked for feedback about you when you show up for an interview. It could be, you know, it could be the receptionist. If you're on a hospital unit, it could be the unit secretary. So if you're dismissive or rude or you ignore someone, that feedback is often likely to get back to the person who's making the hiring decision. So be really aware of how you're showing up from the minute you show up, and I'd say even like when you're pulling into the parking lot, be on your best behavior, because you never know who's peeking out the window to see what you're doing on the way in. So we're gonna skip this video just because I wanna make sure we're respectful of your time. And then we're, you know, talking about the end of the interview. You wanna make sure that you ask for next steps. You don't wanna be left hanging going, are they gonna call me, are they not gonna call me? So ask them what the next steps are and when you should expect to hear back. And then if you haven't heard back, that gives you an opportunity to reconnect with the person you interviewed with to say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation, would love to learn more. But you can't do that if you haven't asked that question during the interview. Of course, thank the interviewers, ask for their contact information if you don't have it, right? Because sometimes someone in the recruiting team set the interview up and you may not have their email. So if you need, ask them for that. Remind them that you're interested in the job, assuming you are, right? And hopefully you haven't gone to the interview if you weren't interested in the job. You're only there because you think it's a good use of your time and a good use of their time. And then, of course, shake hands. Like Tom was saying, shaking hands, sometimes a lost art. So, you know, practice your handshake. Make sure you're not like the, you know, limp, like dead fish kind of handshake, but you also don't want to break anybody's bones. But shake their hands. And then I think there was one more slide about after the interview. So when you get back, within 24 hours max, thank you note. Can be an email, it's fine, doesn't have to be handwritten, calligraphy, fancy pants, you know, thank you note. Just an email, thanking them. And then, like I was saying, you ask the question, when will I know something? And if you haven't heard by then, you show your organization skills and you're interested in the job by following up with them. So.
Don't stalk them.
No.
Just follow up.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Can you say something regarding follow-up email? The email should not come from pretty young things.
Correct. Yes. We didn't talk about that. We talked about your outgoing voicemail, but we didn't talk about your email address.
That's deep right there.
Yeah. I had a friend, so I had a friend, she was the mom of like several young children, as wholesome as the day is long. Her hair was red and her email address was Red Hot Mama. And I'm like, you have got to change that email address. Or at least get a new one for job searching. Yeah.
Sent you something that said from Nurse Juicy.
From Nurse Juicy, yeah, that would be, yeah. That would be, yeah.
What job did you apply for?
It begs the question.
I don't think it was
It's
Oscar.
a conversation that I have as an academic advisor. I have it all the time, coming in and saying, and some of them are seasoned. They've been an LPN for 30 years and they're transitioning over, and I'm going, you know, use your name. Use your name, but not Nurse Juicy, not Pretty Hot Mama, Mother's Free.
Red Hot Mama.
I
I go
think I would
through it
ask that
all the
question.
time.
So, what does Nurse Juicy mean?
Yeah.
You know I was going to ask that question. You gotta ask those questions. If you guys put on the resume, question. Are there any questions of us though?
Yeah, what else can we answer for y'all?
How do we do that? We'll make sure.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here, and I always love to come out and talk about this because it is something I know, not everybody knows how to go to an interview or how to prepare for it, and so we want to make sure our folks at Delgado are prepared and ready to knock the socks off of all the interviews in a good way, not in a bad way. Yes. So thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Say hello to New Jersey too.
Yes, so one is the Bureau. We don't know that. That's the US. You don't have to stand up. Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm not